Hello and welcome to Bits and Atoms, the Grisham Robotics Founder Series. I'm your host, Elias Can, and today I've got Shelley Langan-Newton, co-founder and CEO of SQR, joining me. To get started, Shelley, would you mind sharing a quick intro about you and SQR?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. My name's Shelley Langan-Newton, as you said, and I've got a background in telco. So before I was in the digital identity space, I spent a good nearly decade running telcos. So as an operator, reseller, all sorts, anything you name it, in telco I've probably touched. I was also the co-founder of an internet exchange, which is probably deep networking, sort of why the internet runs like it runs today. So that's my background. Before that, I was a performing arts teacher. So I always call it a bit of a checkered past. But interesting, lots of skills that go into everything that I do today from all of those things. SQR has been for like 3 years almost, so 3.5 years, where we launched in beta. We won a government contract really soon after we launched, which was a really significant moment for us in our very early days, especially to land something like that. We've been on a real startup journey, as they all are, since then.
Amazing. And yeah, performing arts teacher before that is a very unique background and very interesting. So was that something early on in your career and something that you had studied to be on the education side, going through uni?
So I got when I was really quite academic at school, but I didn't know what I was going to do. I wanted to go to uni. I didn't know what degree I was going to take, and my mom gave me this amazing advice, which she can't even remember giving me now. But she said, "Do what you love, because it will be something that you can get out of bed every day and commit to." And that advice has been something that has taken me literally throughout my life to today, because sometimes I've had a career pivot. It was not so much of a pivot at the time. It was like a terrifying leap into the abyss. But now I can call it a career pivot, and it all sounds very effortless. But that, even that, just the leap into that, it was I loved teaching. I loved lots of parts of that, and certainly teaching performing arts was amazing. But it had got to be, I'd had a decade doing that, and my heart wasn't in it anymore. And so I was looking for something new, and someone had been offering me actually a role for 2 years, and he was an entrepreneur. And I suppose that was, I feel like that was the start of my entrepreneurial journey. But actually, just being around entrepreneurs, I've been around them like all my life. So that was sort of like the initiation from being a child and being around parents that had their own businesses, and seeing that was just a really normal part of my life. So it really normalizes the highs and lows, I think, when you see that growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, if it's not scary to do, maybe it's not worth doing. So it's
I feel like I've made my peace with, if I'm not doing something that's actually terrifying me at any moment in time, then I don't feel like I'm alive. And so I used to rail against that a little bit, probably until about 5 or 6 years ago. And then I realized that that's just who I was, and I needed to make peace with it and just be okay with being on the edge of uncertainty at all times. And actually, there's a skill to that, and there's things that you can do to help yourself in that space. And that's been a really support, like my journey in the last 5 years around how do I ride the wave in a really calm way as much as I can. And we're always learning on that front, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with how chaotic things can be now with AI. Everything's busy all the time.
Yeah, and not only that, I really have learned, in business itself, you can have so much covered, you can have plans and backup plans, and what's after a backup plan? A backup of a backup plan. But actually something can come along, and you never expect it, and that does happen. And that might be political things that you have no power over those things. And I remember going into a fundraise, and there was a big political shift in the day. I had 5 meetings lined up with investors, and literally on the Monday, something happened, and they were like, "Oh, we're holding. We really want to invest, but we're holding." And so that sort of I remember that being a real moment where I was like, it's out of my hands, like I can't do anything other than say, okay, right, well, when can I get back in touch, and keep in touch with those keep those relationships going. But
I mean, political climate is definitely, I think there's so many variables to think about and deal with as a founder, and that's one that I would say is kind of on the periphery until it's like important and it matters. Like the parallel to the US, like I'm sure a lot of folks who are building and shipping or importing physical goods being hit with those tariffs, last year and this year, it's something that you can't really forecast and say
well, it was the tariffs that was the topic of conversation that week. So it was even if it wasn't affecting them, people were seeing, how is it going to affect them, how is it going to affect my portfolio of investments that I have? I'm just going to see what's going to happen. Like risk appetite is really interesting, and I think an approach to risk, and that's probably sort of what we're talking about a little bit here, is that taking risk is like taking calculated risk is important, because you often don't know what's on the other side of something, especially if it's new, especially if it's experimental. But you can do that in a more calculated way to reduce the likelihood of failure. But it's
there's never a foolproof way to guarantee certainty, though, which is always the challenge.
If you find it, let me know.
I'll be searching a long time. Amazing. And for you, since you've been a founder multiple times, and you kind of got on that journey going from a totally different field as well, like for you, I know you mentioned you had seen and been around it growing up with parents who were very entrepreneurial. Were there certain aspects of making that leap to be a founder for you personally that felt really aligned for you?
So I always say, if I ever wrote a book, it'd be called The Accidental Founder, because I always feel like it was I should probably not say that. I probably should say it was all part of a plan. But I mean, I just sort of find myself in interesting positions because I'm so curious, and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Let's ask more questions and poke around over there and go like, what's going on? Try and understand things. That's been a fundamental driver for me, like throughout my life. But I think there was one specific. Looking back, it's always, I'm super reflective. So looking back on things that have been key points to me. One of the things was around about 10 years ago, just after I'd left teaching. I was involved with an organization that was connecting startups and funding opportunities. So this was in the angel investment community. And so I was helping the founder of that. It was something called North Invest. It was across the north of the UK, and it was really trying to get some economic empowerment into the north of the UK across the whole of the north. So that was a real insight to me into the startup world, because I did not realize that someone could have an idea and no financial resources and pitch that to someone else and get money. Because I was like, the what do they say? The ideas are plentiful. It's the execution that counts. And so, I mean, if they don't say that, That's not a genuine quote from someone, so I probably ripped it off somewhere. But in summary, so that being that, you know, the execution, and to execute, you're going to need some capital at some point. And just because you might not have access to that cash because of whatever your background is, whatever your financial circumstances are, the fact that someone else that might not have that idea but believes in you to go and execute on that idea is, it was a new concept to me that I had never been exposed to, and so it was, I looking back at that now, I'm like, wow, it really does. It was really pivotal moment to be involved in that. And I mean, I was just helping connect the dots, you know, between an investment and angels. So really, I was in a really privileged position because I got to see loads of business plans. I got to see loads of investment ideas, and I got to speak to the angels involved and go, are you interested in that? Are you not? Why are you interested? Why are you not? Like, let me feed that back to the founder. And so that was a real education without knowing. I was being educated, which has been helpful for me. It's sort of, you know, later, you know, 8 years down the line still. So
Yeah, but it's great exposure as that middle person, because like you said, you're getting information from both sides, and you know, you're being able to see it over multiple companies over time as well. So it's not just like a one and done, it's like this continuous cycle of like seeing and understanding, because it is a very subjective world on the investor side as well.
Yeah, and absolutely. And you know, I would see people say no, there's no chance that's going to go, and then someone else being like, oh my god, that's amazing, I really want to get behind that. And you know, that even that, knowing that, as you know, if you don't have the experience or the sort of lived experience, even, or just a knowledge of that is what happens, you know, it actually makes it easier when you do get no's, because you go, well, okay, that's not aligned for that investor. It doesn't mean that there's no one else out there that's ever going to believe in this. And you know, rejection is, you know, a really, really helpful thing. It's really, really part of the journey, and always understanding, well, okay, that's cool. You know, I appreciate that. I appreciate, you know, that. Can you give me any reasons why? And also, do you think there's anyone in your network that might be interested? You know, just taking that straight no is going to be the worst thing that you can do if you're going to get a no.
Yeah. And it's just a numbers game where more likely than not, it is a lot of no's. And I think on both sides, you know, the investor side and the founder side as well, like you're both hunting outliers. You're both hunting like the yeses, but they're going to be outliers versus like most are going to be no's at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I suppose the key is to try and be as strategic as you can with those, and go, right, okay, so how do I make sure that I'm going to get no's, but how do I make sure that I target the right sort of investment for me? So, you know, what stage you're at and who's going to be interested. That so I had a lot of experience in the angels sort of environment, and a little bit in family office. But then when it came to, you know, VC, it was like, it's a different world. Like, I don't understand this world. So because I knew that at some point we would really be in the world of VC at some point with either the quantum or where we were going to be in terms of, you know, once we got to growth, that sort of, rather than that proving the concept. So at that point, me thinking in advance, going, I need to start learning about this world, because this world is going to creep up on me and I'm going to have no idea about what I'm going to be entering into. And actually, if you can think, you know, about positioning, if you can think about corporate structuring, if you can, you know, all of these things that when you start out on your startup journey, you go, I'll do that next week, I'll do that tomorrow, because I've got other things. I mean, obviously you've got everything to do when you start out, but those things are really important if the end goal is, you know, some sort of exit that you're going to have really tangible return in. And, like, I do wish I'd have learned some of that stuff earlier. But, no one knows everything. There's always stuff to learn.
Yeah, it's never ending. And I think, a lot of folks want to be maybe founders because they love the creating and building piece. But like you mentioned, like, it's not just creating. You need to be a good business person and you need to be a good people person. And like the combination of those all at once, it's a lot. It's hard for anyone to do and excel at.
It is really hard. And I think there's a real, I suppose there's a real potential for you to try and adapt to situations as a human, like a person, and be like, what does this person need from me? What does this situation need from me? What does this, how do I act in this way? And actually, in my experience, like that's just draining, and that's not something that you can, that's not energy that's well placed. So you need as much energy as you possibly can to do all the absolute humongous amount of tasks that you got to do every day. So how do you keep your energy as intact as possible? And that's by turning up as authentically as possible, as you as possible in every scenario. And if that means you don't know the answer to a question, that is, hey, I don't know, but let me get back to you, because I'm going to find that out and I'm going to get back to you straight away. And that we don't, having an act, having a pretense, I think is wasted energy. So preservation of energy is certainly something that I again continue to work on.
Yeah, I think it's a great point and a great idea and thing to think about. And for you, so building off of that, so with SQR and being in kind of this identity verification space, it must be something that personally excites and motivates you, so that you're not using any wasted energy on it, right?
Yeah, and the absolute privilege of being able to talk about the concepts around identity. And I mean, it's really complex. I actually really like it because it's really complex. It's not very straightforward. It's really an ecosystem. And one of the things that I'd learned from telco, and one of the reasons why I was really interested in doing something different in the identity space, was in telco, they'd really sorted that sort of connection to machine, talking to, machine to machine, in a secure way, transmitting data, like that being done. So I was like, well, why, when you put people in, does it get really messy? And it just doesn't seem to work. So it was applying that sort of same principles as in telco, so interoperability driven through standards, and going, can that be done in the identity space? So when I was looking at the identity space, then it was a case of, okay, what are the standards that are out there? Where are they on their adoption lineage of, standards take so long, and their communities are built up around these standards because they take so long to work together, to adopt, to iron out issues that might occur. And so the standards to me seemed really at a tipping point of reliance. So it was a case of seeing that go, well, I know that the digital world is not going to stay like this forever. It's actually going to get more important that we prove that we are who we say we are. And so actually, then if you tip into that, the standards actually are there to start, to stop this, what I saw as basically a paper-based, a digitization of a paper-based process, and actually to start relying on this interoperability through standards. And so there's there's so many fundamentals around, ethics, data privacy, not sharing your information. We share far too much information online. I am also guilty of it in many ways, because if you ever go onto my LinkedIn, you will know far too much about me. But ultimately, the really crucial bits of sensitive information that we have to give time after time after time is yeah, we sort of do it without thinking now, and that's a bit worrying given the AI technology that's out there that can be in the hands of nefarious criminals more easily nowadays.
Absolutely. And it's kind of scattered and fractured all over the place in all these like one-off spots that you've given some kind of sensitive, whether it's like personal identification, or I hear similar things for like health as well, or like, I mean, people that did some of the genetic like DNA
Yeah,
test results, like that data is sold all the time, and
yeah,
it's not like you were expecting that to
yeah,
necessarily be the case, but it's such
yeah.
like valuable information that's floating out there
Yeah, or
as well.
you hear of cases that someone's connected with you. What's the one that they I won't mention a name, but where you trace your lineage, your ancestry, and then all of a sudden you've got someone that's on the other side of the world going, "Hi, I'm your third cousin twice removed." Like so yeah. It's really interesting, and I think generally we just go around. We have such busy lives that are so jam full of so many commitments, and ultimately, what we need is the guardrails already put in place for us. Like we need to just be able to do this simply, easily, but actually at no cost and risk to us, because our personal data is really valuable to us, and making sure it doesn't get in the wrong hands or is misused or used in a way that is going to disadvantage us in the long run, which is not it's not great. So yeah, I feel like it's a real mission for us and the team at SQR, and we definitely believe that we get up every day and try and do something positive to the world, which is definitely important to everyone, every one of us that works here.
Absolutely. Amazing. And I love to hear it, and love the sentiment, especially for someone who's going to be making sure our personal information is safe. Love to hear that you are excited and motivated to do it. We're at time here, so I want to thank you, Shelley, for joining me today. It's an Adams. What a great conversation, and I'll let you get back to building.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on. Thanks.